Hey everyone, welcome back to Glue Lala. Well, fall is officially here. The nights are getting colder and the leaves are starting to change, and I love it. I'm still creating a bunch of things for fall. I'm still trying to get my house decorated. So today I have 3 different types of projects that you can hang on your wall for fall. All right everyone, let's get started. Okay, for the first project, I've really been trying to use up a lot of the things that I already have in my stash, and I have quite a few of these tags. They always have these at the Dollar Tree for the different holidays, and obviously I got this one around the 4th of July. And this tag's just a little bit different from the other ones because the hole at the top is a little bit bigger, which I kind of like a little bit better because I like being able to use some nautical rope through the top of the hole instead of just a piece of jute cord. So I started by removing the stars that were already on the front of the tag, and I kept those because I'm sure I'll use those in a later project. And I always like to paint on the back side of the tags and signs and stuff like that because I don't like wasting time removing the paper off the front of the tag. So I just take some craft paper and I place it over the design that's already on the tag so that I can paint on the back side. Once I had the back side of the tag covered with the craft paper, I decided to give the front side of the tag one really good coat of the plaster color by Waverly. I knew I would be distressing this sign a little bit, so I wasn't too worried about giving it a full coverage, but the chalk paint always does such a good job that one coat was enough anyway. Then I took one of these small wooden crates that you can find at the Dollar Tree and I gave that a quick coat of the plaster color as well. I decided to distress these pieces using the truffle color by Waverly. So I started with a little wooden crate and I took a tiny paintbrush and I decided to add a good bit of the paint inside the grooves on the crate just to show those off a little bit more. And then I used a wet wipe to wipe off the excess paint. And once I had the grooves on the crate filled in, I only did that on the front because the back side you wouldn't be able to see. Then I went through with my larger paintbrush and I did dry brushing all over the 3 sides and the bottom of the crate. And then I did that as well with the tag. And after I was done dry brushing, I wanted to mute out the color just a little bit more. So I went back through with the wet wipe and I kind of wiped it back over that wet paint. That way it just kind of diffused those strokes a little bit more. And I did the same thing on the tag too. I did the dry brushing technique with my larger paintbrush and then I went through with the wet wipe and just diffused those brush strokes a little bit. The Dollar Tree carries these little laser cut wooden cutouts, and I grabbed several packs of them when I first saw them. So I wanted to try using one of the leaf shapes as kind of like a rubber stamp. So I took a small piece of dowel and I just added a tiny little dot of hot glue on the back side of the leaf, and I glued the dowel to it just to help stamp a little bit better. So then using the same truffle color, I ran a coat of the truffle over the bottom side of the leaf, and then I was able to press that down onto my tag. And the lines didn't come out perfect, but because this is a distressed tag, I thought it looked really cool with the distressing on the tag. So I just kind of did that randomly all over the tag in different ways. So some of the leaves were facing up, some were facing down, and I kind of kept turning it around, and then some of the leaves looked like they ran off the edge of the tag, and I just filled up the whole tag with the stamps of the leaves. Next, I just took my ruler and I lined it up with the bottom of the tag just to help give me a guide as to where I needed to glue my crate on. So I'm just using hot glue here. I always tell you guys that I use the Gorilla Glue sticks and I always have good luck with those, but I know a lot of people like to use wood glue too, but I just always seem to have okay luck with the Gorilla Glue sticks. So I just lined the crate up and I tried to space it out even on both sides with the tag, and I glued it towards the bottom of the tag. I didn't line it up the whole way with the bottom. I wanted there to be a little bit of a gap on the bottom as well. Then to decorate the front of the crate, I decided just to make a simple bow, and I bought this burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree. It's a really dark brown, so I thought it looked really good with that truffle color, and I wanted to keep this bow pretty simple, so I just kind of looped it around and then accordion pleated it in the middle and then tied the center with some jute string. So I always have such a hard time with bows. I always think I'm getting the jute in the middle and I never do, so I usually have to redo it. But once I actually had the jute centered in the bow, then I took some of this farmhouse moss ribbon that I also found at the Dollar Tree, and I just glued a piece around the center of the bow just to finish it off a little bit more. To finish off the tag, I glued the bow to the front of the crate, and then I put some floral foam inside the crate, and I covered the top of the floral foam with some of the Spanish moss that they sell at the Dollar Tree, and then I tried my hand at arranging some flowers in that, which you guys know I always struggle with, but I think I did pretty okay on this one. Now, what's great about this tag is since it does have that large hole in the top, I decided to tie some nautical rope through that hole. I just looped it through and then tied a knot on the end. And what makes it nice about that is then I could either hang this tag from the nautical rope, or I could actually just hang it from the hole that's in the top of the tag. The second project, I took one of these 12 by 12 canvases that I already had in my stash. Now, they don't sell canvases this big at the Dollar Tree. I had to get this one at Michael's, but it was a pretty good deal. I bought a big multi-pack whenever I found a sale on them. So I started by removing the canvas from the frame, but I held on to it because I knew I was going to use it in the next project. So once I had all of the canvas off of the frame, including off of the back, I went ahead and I removed the staples from the back as well. I don't always do that, but this time the staples seemed like they were coming out pretty easy, so I decided to go ahead and just take them out this time. Once I had my frame all prepped, I decided to give it a good coat of the Plaster Color by Waverly. At this point, I wasn't sure if I was going to be distressing this frame or not, so I kind of gave it a really good coat. I didn't do 2 coats, I just did 1, but I wanted to make sure it had a pretty full coverage in case I decided not to distress it. These galvanized metal words from the Dollar Tree are one of my favorite things to DIY with. They always have them out for every season and every holiday. I typically don't ever keep them how they are. I almost always paint them, and because they are metal, I always give them 2 coats of paint just because I'm always afraid that some of the paint is going to chip off of the word. So for this word harvest, I decided to give this 2 coats of the ink color by Waverly. For the background on this sign, I decided to dig around in my scrapbook paper, and I found this fall collection by Echo Park, and I pulled out this polka dot print because polka dots are one of my favorite prints. And what's nice about this is since the scrapbook paper is 12 by 12 and so is my frame, I knew I just needed to cut this scrapbook paper down to 11.5 by 11.5. Now, to make it a little bit more sturdy, I decided to cut down a piece of chipboard. You can see this is just an old cover from another scrapbook pad, and I did the same thing. I cut it down to an 11.5 by 11.5, and then I just used my ATG gun to glue the 2 pieces together. For the focal point on this piece, I decided to take a piece of pretty wide burlap ribbon and cut it so that it was just a little bit wider than the scrapbook paper, and then I had this other burlap on hand. I think I got this at Walmart, and you can see that the edges there are kind of sewed together so that it wouldn't fray, but I actually wanted it to fray, so I cut off the seam on both sides, and then I pulled a few of the burlap strings from each side just to give it a little bit of a fringier look. So originally I was just going to lay the 2 pieces of burlap down on the center of this piece and then glue the word harvest right over top of them, and I put my ruler next to my paper so that I would have a guide as to where the center was. And something happened along the way, and when I flipped it over, I realized it was not centered. But there's no mistakes in crafting, right? Just happy discovery. So when I realized that it was off-centered, that's when I discovered that I needed to move on to another plan. So I decided that I would have to add some embellishments toward the bottom of my piece. Since I love farmhouse, I decided to make a simple bow out of this black and white striped ribbon that I had, and then I just kind of created a little bit of a base with some fall leaves and some fall flowers, and I hot glued everything into place, and then I put the bow over top. Now, I've been trying to reorganize my craft room a little bit, and I'm having a really hard time trying to figure out how to organize my ribbon. So if you guys have any tips on how you like to store your ribbon or how you like to organize your ribbon, leave it in the comments and let me know what you do to stay organized. Okay, so for the last project, I knew I wanted to use up this piece of canvas material from the last project. So I took one of these pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. They have a bunch of different kinds of pumpkins. They have these ones that have this really cute print on them. Some of them just have an orange front. Some of them are just plain wood, but I had an extra one of these ones in my stash, so I decided to use it up. So I started by taking the little metal leaf that was off the front of the pumpkin. It was pretty easy to pull out, and I cut off the jute hanger that came with it. Then I laid it down on the piece of canvas, and I laid it down on the side that had the coating because I wanted the back side of the canvas to show on this pumpkin. And I just traced around it with a permanent marker, and then I cut it out, and I cut kind of on the inside of the line that I drew. So I cut about probably not even 1/8 of an inch towards the inside of the line. That way I knew it would fit better on my pumpkin. I wouldn't have so much overhang. I was afraid that if I used hot glue to attach the canvas material to the pumpkin that you would see the little bumps and lines from the hot glue underneath the canvas material. So I decided to use my art glitter glue instead, and it did a really good job because I was going back and forth whether I should use this or if I should use like a fabric glue, but I decided to use this at the end. And I always have that linked in the description box too if you're ever interested in that. So this canvas material fit pretty well on this pumpkin. I was pretty pleased with the fit on it. I didn't really have much overhang, and there wasn't really a gap anywhere around the outside. So once I had the canvas in place, I wanted it to dry really well before I did anything else to it. So I decided to move on to the stem. Now, I've wrapped a lot of pumpkin stems in my day with jute twine, and for some reason, this one was just such a pain in the butt. So I started by hot gluing a little bit of the jute on the front, and then I thought I would be able to just wind it up like I do a normal stem, but I think because of the shape of this stem, I actually had to hot glue almost every row down. So once I had all of the jute in place, there was a little bit of seepage from the hot glue and the jute itself. I guess maybe because I'm coming to the end of the roll, I don't know. It just seemed really frayed. So I did take my lighter to it to burn off some of the frayed edges and then to kind of melt off some of that glue that seeped out. So in the end, it turned out really well. I liked how the stem looked, but I kind of wish I would have just painted it because it was such a pain. Next, I decided to create a band on this side because I wanted this sign to say "Hello Pumpkin." I've been seeing that phrase a lot around, and I think it's really cute. So I just took my painter's tape and I decided to create a band with some paint. So I used the Moss Color by Waverly, and the space that I blocked out was about 2.5 inches, and I just put my painter's tape down to give me a guide as to where I needed to paint. And while I was painting, I kind of painted away from the edges of the tape, if that makes any sense, because I was afraid that it would seep underneath the painter's tape. So I was just kind of filling in the center, and then when I got to the edge of the painter's tape, I kind of pulled away from the edge so that I wasn't like jamming my brush underneath the tape by accident. I had this piece of faux leather in my stash. This actually came from the Dollar Tree. I found this a while back when they started bringing out materials for cutting machines like Cricut's. So I decided to create a little bit of a band piece out of this faux leather, and I think mine measured about 5 inches by 1.5 inches. So I just traced on the back so you wouldn't see the lines of the marker, and then I cut that band piece out. I knew I wanted this leather piece to look like it was kind of hammered on or something like that onto this pumpkin, and I have this huge roll of these little gold dots in my stash that I got on clearance from Hobby Lobby. So I cut 2 of those off and I hot glued 1 to each end of the leather. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to have these things in their stash, but you could easily just use thumbtacks. You could cut the tack part off of a thumbtack, or you could even use brads and cut the little prongy parts off the brad and do the same thing. Or you could even use something else like little buttons. I think that would look cute too. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted this sign to say "Hello Pumpkin." So I used my Cricut to cut the word pumpkin out on the piece that I painted on the pumpkin. But I knew on this leather piece I was going to write the word "hello," and I decided to step out of my comfort zone and try a little bit of hand lettering. And I just wanted some simple letters, so I felt safe in doing this, but I still decided to write it in pencil first. And then I went back through with my permanent marker and I kind of traced over my pencil lines with the permanent marker to write out the word hello. I cut the word pumpkin out of some black vinyl using my Cricut. Now, I didn't use any particular font for this. I actually just searched pumpkin in Cricut Design Space, and a bunch of different pumpkin patterns came up, and then the word pumpkin also came up a few times. And I liked this one, so I decided to use this one. Now, I've tried to use vinyl on this canvas material before, and it was really a struggle, but I think because I painted it first, the vinyl really took well to the paint. So I decided to place the word pumpkin down first so that I could have kind of a guide as to where I wanted to put my little leather tag, and I kind of offset it a little bit, and then I just added that to my sign. I think this would be a great place to stop if you were more into like a simple modern kind of look, but since I like the farmhouse style a little bit better, I decided to add just a few sprigs of some fall greenery to the top with a little bow that I tied out of some thinner nautical rope. Here's a final look at all the projects today. I don't really think I have a favorite today, but I was pretty excited about that first one. I was excited that that wooden leaf cutout worked as a stamp. I think that added a really cool background to that piece. You'll have to let me know in the comments what you think. And make sure you give me any tips on storing ribbon, because I'm really struggling with that. Alright everyone, I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell, do all the things. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!